Hey Internet, Caligula here and welcome to another video. Today I am very excited to present to you the first of a three-part series of videos, all inspired by the Netflix series Bates Motel. So, if you don't already know and if you haven't seen Bates Motel, the series is based on characters from the movie Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock. And the two main characters of this series are Norma Bates and her son Norman Bates. So like I said a minute ago, I'm going to be releasing 3 videos, all inspired by Bates Motel. The first one is this create-a-sim of Norma and Norman, and the second 2 are going to be builds. I'm not going to tell you what they are yet, but if you've seen this series or if you do some Googling, it'll be really easy to guess what I have coming next. And I'm very excited about it, but that's all I'll say. Anyway, I figured people would be more interested in watching the builds, so I thought that I would talk more about the series itself as well as Psycho in this video. And also because I really want to talk about the show, I thought, you know what, in my voiceover for this Create-a-Sim, I'll just go ahead and it'll be full of spoilers and I'll get to talk about all the things that I want to talk about, but I'll go ahead and keep the 2 builds spoiler-free. So there, you've been warned. This video will contain spoilers about Bates Motel and about Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, which was made in the 60s, so I really kind of feel like that's in spoiler-free territory now. Like, you could talk about the plot of the movie and nobody should get upset, but that's just my opinion. So the spoiler-filled section of this video starts right now. Okay, so I have not actually finished watching Bates Motel yet. I have about 1.5 episodes left until the end of the series, until the end of the whole thing, seasons 1 through 4. And honestly, I don't know what's gonna happen next. So if you have seen Bates Motel but you haven't seen Psycho, here's what happens. So Psycho is about this woman named Marion Crane, I think. She gets into some shenanigans, yada yada yada, and ends up staying at Bates Motel, which is run by Norman Bates. Now when Marion meets Norman, he seems really polite, but he mentions a few things about his mother and how she's insane and prevents him from talking to women and that sort of thing. But he ends up inviting her to dinner and she accepts, and later that night Marion is taking a shower and she's stabbed by someone who it turns out to be Norman, and people who come looking for Marion end up coming to the Bates Motel, and Norman ends up killing some of them too until he's finally caught by the police and put in a mental institution, and it comes out that he murdered his mother 10 years before, and after that he felt so sorry or so guilty that he developed this psychological disorder that made him have a separate personality that was actually his mother's personality. So it was like he had split personalities, and one was him and then one was him as his mother, and he also dressed up as his mother sometimes. Oh, and also the people who end up finding out about Marion Crane and Norman and all the other murders end up finding Norma's mummified corpse in the house because he had just kept her corpse around because he felt so guilty and just pretended like she was still alive. So the interesting thing about Bates Motel is if you know the plot of Psycho, you already know what's coming ultimately at the end. So what you're really watching is a slow descent towards the inevitable. And so it's really interesting how the creators of this series have taken Alfred Hitchcock's characters and have given them backstories and brought them to life and have really shown in Bates Motel the progression of Norman's mental illness and also how his relationship with his mother, I don't know if it caused it, but definitely made it worse. So one of the things that I find really interesting about the series, and I guess that this was something that was more prominent in the first season, was that relationship between Norma and Norman and the effect that that had on Norman's mental illness. Because I think that what you might call what's going on with Norma might be classified as narcissistic personality disorder. I mean, she names her son after herself, and she doesn't allow him to see other people, and she gets extremely jealous, and then they say things to each other they're 2 parts of the same person and there's a cord between their hearts. It's a weird relationship, and I think that in the first season at least it seems like Norma is really, it seems like she has narcissistic personality disorder or some form of that or whatever, but I think that in later seasons I don't know if that turns out to actually be true once you find out more of her backstory, because it turns out that the abuse that she suffered in her past also has fueled kind of how she behaves in the present. I don't know, but I just thought that that was a really interesting dynamic in the series. I've also really enjoyed the other characters that were introduced as people who were part of their lives. For instance, I really like Dylan. I kind of thought that Dylan's backstory, like with Norma's incest with her brother and Dylan being the product of that, was a little bit much, but I don't know. I really like Dylan and his relationship with Emma especially, and I think that the actor who plays Dylan does a really good job of seeming related to Norma and Norman, but not close to them, if that makes sense. It makes sense if you've seen the series, right? But also, speaking of the actors who play these characters, so Norman is played by Freddie Highmore, who I think was also in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And Norma is played by, I might mess her name up, her name is Vera Farmiga, I think? Farmiga. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but she is fantastic. She's just so funny, and she does a really great job. She just does a really great job of demonstrating the childish aspects of Norma's personality in the way that she runs and the inflections of her voice. There's one part I remember where she runs off, and then I think she actually shoots her cell phone with a gun. And then when she comes back, she sees the sheriff, who says to her something like, "I thought you were dead." And she says to him, "Why does everybody think that I'm dead? I'm alive, Alex. I'm alive. You're alive. Whoopee." But she's just, Vera Farmiga is just fantastic. Yeah, so seeing the dynamic between Norma and Norman, especially in the first season, is one of my favorite parts about this series. And also just like that feeling of watching a slow descent. And I also really just like the other characters too. Sometimes it seems like a bit random. Like they really get into a lot of shenanigans on this show. They really got some bad luck, but it's really fun to watch. And even though maybe like the subplots of the story get a little bit campy sometimes, like, you know, with Dylan's father and stuff like that, I think that the long plot is just, it's fantastic. And also the writing of the series is fantastic too. I find myself when watching wanting to say aloud the things that the characters should but don't say, and I think that that is a product of excellent writing. So anyway, I think that I've talked for way too long in this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I really hope that you're as excited as I am about the next 2 videos that are to come in this series. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you in my next video. Goodbye!